afternoon, everyone.
Yay for our teachers! Yay for our teachers!
Correct.
We got a feeling this mayor's the one. We want a boss who talks real tough. When we ask too many questions, we want to be told to shut up. Tax and crime and financing. We can pay for anything like shopping malls with movie screens and everything but
and I tested very positively in another sense. So this morning, I tested positively toward negative, right? So, no, I tested perfectly this morning. Meaning I tested negative.
It is Tuesday, October 6th, and live from my apartment, this is the Ben Joravsky Show. The Ben Joravsky Show is brought to you in part by the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9, the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150, and our good friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor. Hey, how's it going, everybody? It's me, Dennis. So, no Ben today. We're calling it No Ben Tuesday, and here's why. Sadly, Ben's father passed away last night, so he's taking care of that and taking the day off. The funeral's today, so yeah, we're figured we'd do a live show anyway. We have a live stream audience, and we have over like 1,000 episodes, so I figured, what the hell? Let's play some older interviews, maybe ones you haven't heard. For instance, our latest interview with Richard Steele. We're going to be playing that momentarily. The real deal, Richard Steele. It was our Monday Benny J bonus interview. You can download these Benny J bonus interviews at both Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites, and wherever else you download your favorite podcasts. Once again, Ben's father passed away. He said he's doing good. He wanted to let everybody know. Tomorrow we'll be back with a brand new show. He's just taking care of business. If you'd like to send condolences, BennyJShow@gmail.com. BENNY, the letter J, show @gmail.com. Oh my. You can send us a voicemail if you'd like. 708-658-4788. 708-658-4788. Send us a voicemail if you'd like. Send your condolences. You can send us an email. You can always post something on our social media at Benny J Show, BENNY, the letter J Show. Once again, Ben will be back tomorrow. We'll be back with a brand new Ben Joravsky Show. Do not worry about that tomorrow. He wanted everybody to know that he's doing all right. And in the meantime, we're just going to play some interviews, and we're going to let the live stream chat away. What's happening, live stream chat room? How we doing? We hanging in there? All right. Man, 2020 has been awful. A lot of bad news is going on. My dad passed away. Ben's dad passed away. COVID. Oh, my God. So much stuff going on. Hand me that bottle. So, hey, how about some good news? Live stream chat. How about that? If you've heard any good news all throughout the year, let us know and post it on the live stream chat. I'm going to play our interview with Richard Steele. And after that interview, I'll come back. We'll read your comments. Good news, if you have any, or if you want to talk about last night's town hall with former Vice President Joe Biden.
We're going to make sure we recognize you, advance you, and make sure that you, look, my children, my grandchildren, you are the future. You are the future. As I said, for example, I made the comment that I view myself as a transitional president. They meant, is that one term? It's transition to your generation. You're the best educated. You're the most open. You're the least prejudiced generation in American history. The future is yours, and I'm counting on you.
I watched that whole damn thing. Did you guys? I didn't really learn much. It was just him he would say something, then he would go off into these weird stories about his past. It was weird. A lot of moments like that. That's the only clip I have. That clip right there just kind of sums up how it all went. What were your thoughts? Head over to the Ben Joravsky Show live stream chat if you're listening live. Let us know. And after our interview with Richard Steele, we will be reading your comments. So we look forward to, I say I, because it's just me here. I look forward to reading your comments as today's program rolls along. I have the Richard Steele interview, and then after that, I'm going to be playing an interview that we did back in August with this feller named Jonathan Ballew. He's a street journalist, I guess you can call him. He writes articles, and he was out during the protests after the George Floyd unrest, and he was also out for the Columbus statue protest as well. So we're going to be playing an interview with him. We did that back in August. Very interesting. Kind of, how our summer was. A look back at summer now that summer's gone. Damn it, summer's gone. Hand me that bottle. I love summer. But so we're going to be hearing from Jonathan Ballew as well, talking about how he spent his summer out on the protests that were going on all summer. So we're going to be hearing that as well. All right, we got some good news coming in. Weigh in on the live stream chat. Good news. And after our Richard Steele interview, I will be reading your good news. I'll get the ball rolling here. I got some good news. Found this on goodnewsnetwork.org. Yeah, turns out that's a website. So if you're looking for good news, just go to Good News Network. This is a story about a grandpa. I feel like Casey. This is a story about a grandpa. Casey. When 72-year-old Randy Long was cleaning out his garage not long ago, he came across some practice baseballs he used to toss around with his son and grandson. Yeah, this guy, Grandpa, leaves a free bucket of baseballs with a touching note about cherishing your family. It's a good story, right? Just left it for strangers to pick up. Did he clean the baseballs? It's a pandemic. Didn't say. Then he said in the message, hug your family. That's pandemic. I don't know if that's a good idea, but a good story nonetheless, all right? Weigh in with your good stories or your thoughts on the Biden town hall, your thoughts on the election, whatever you want to talk about. Let's get to this Richard Steele interview. Like I said, this is available at both Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites and wherever else you download your favorite podcast. I figured maybe you live streamers may not have heard this because you listen live a lot, So it's our most recent Benny J bonus interview. If you've heard it, hey, just weigh in on the live stream chat, chat amongst yourselves. And after that interview, we will play Jonathan Ballew. All right, here we go. Richard Steele. This Ben Joravsky Show, Benny J bonus interview is brought to you in part by the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9, the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150, and our good friends at the Chicago Federation of Labor. Benny J, take it away.
Bonus time on the Ben Joravsky Show as I speak. It's Friday, October 2nd, 2020. Of course, you can be listening to this anytime. So if you are listening to sometime in the distant future, this is what the headlines were in my beloved bright one, the Chicago Sun-Times. Poll packed on day one. Chicagoans line up for blocks outside a Loop supersite as early voting begins in the city. I'm urging absolutely everyone who listens to this show to vote, and I'm absolutely urging everyone who listens to this show to vote for Joe Biden. Oops. That was an editorial endorsement. I'm not supposed to make those. All the rules are out the books. These are desperate times, folks. Don't be stupid, all right? All right, as I do with all my distinguished guests, I ask my distinguished guest to introduce him or herself. So take it away, distinguished guest, and introduce yourself.
I can't believe it. I am a bonus. I thought I heard you say that. Richard Steele, a bonus? First time that's ever happened to me. I've never been a bonus, but it's okay.
You were a bonus last time, and this is Richard Steele, the legendary radio man, the real deal, as I call him. Now, Richard, before we take the deep dive, I'm going to tell listeners what I told you before the show. After the last time you came on the show, I got a call from a listener, very enthusiastic fan of our interview, but she urged me that make sure the next time Richard Steele comes on, that we do some more music talk, not just political talk. And folks, you may not know this. A lot of you BEZ listeners out there just think of Richard Steele as a newsman. But what you don't know is that for years, he was a disc jockey. He knows music inside out. 1390 AM, doing this off the top of my head, WVON. He had a jazz show on BEZ. And perhaps my favorite Millennium Park moment, Richard and Herb Kent were the MCs for the tribute to Don Cornelius, Richard, which is a night I will never forget until dementia overtakes me. All right, Richard?
You know, what's amazing about that, too, is after we did that, I think Don killed himself about maybe a month later, which was awful. That night in Grant Park, that was the first time that Chicago has ever honored Don Cornelius. And that's amazing, given what Soul Train has meant to the nation at that point. He was overwhelmed. You know, he was not a guy given to emotion, but when we were up on the stage and he was being presented with, I think, there's a street sign with his name on it, and he was practically in tears. I was like, really? I've known him a long time. I had known him a long time, and he's always been kind of an acerbic, kind of. I don't know how to describe it, but it would not be emotional. But that was a hell of a night. It really was.
It was a beautiful night. And by the way, Don Cornelius learned the game from the Chess Brothers. So there's no emotion. It's business. And he was a master, astute businessman, Richard Steele. But yeah, he was overtaking that. Someday we'll maybe do a whole show about that night. It had so many twists and turns and behind the scene drama.
Yeah, you have no idea, but I'll tell you about it at some point. Yeah.
Sometime enough time has passed. We can do the behind the scenes. Herb Kent has passed on as well. So why not? Let's tell the real story. But so anyway, Linda, we're definitely going to do a music segment. I'll tease it. An old newsman like Richard Steele knows what I'm doing. It's about what's going on. My opinion, the greatest pop album ever recorded. And then maybe a little Ella Fitzgerald talk as well. But before that, let's get to politics. And number one, everybody's talking about this, Richard. Donald Trump announced at 1 a.m. Washington time, roughly midnight here in Chicago, that he had tested positive for COVID. It was a shock coming right in the middle of the campaign, coming right after the debate, coming right after his appearances at fundraiser in New Jersey and at a rally in Minnesota. I got two questions for you, Richard. Number one, what was your reaction when you heard it? And number two, do you believe it? So let's start with the first one. Talk about where you were when you got the news and how it hit you.
Well, this may sound strange, but I had to get up to pee about 1:30, 2 o'clock in the morning. And I always check my phone. It's just a habit that I wish I didn't have. So when I checked my phone, I had an email, or rather a text, from my dentist, who's a very hip guy who's always up on everything. And so he sent this thing at 1:30 in the morning about Trump. And I went, really? I mean, I could hardly go back to sleep, right? But, so I knew early on. As a matter of fact, later when I did get up and my wife came to shake me and she said, did you hear about the Trump thing? Because she's usually ahead of me on everything. I said, oh, yeah.
Yeah, you can't beat Richard Steele. You just had to get up in the middle of the night. Boy, I know that feeling as well.
Unbelievable, But I said to her, I know about it, and so I would have been totally shocked had I not known about it. She said, guess what I just saw on television? So, but I did know. And I had all kinds of thoughts about that. You asked me whether I think it was a fake thing or is a fake thing or not real. Yes. Nah, I don't think so. I mean, what's the benefit there? I mean, Hope Hicks got it, his assistant. And then, she traveled on the same airplane. And, a confined space like that is not a good thing. So my first thought was, how would this benefit him? Because he's a big trickster. He's a con man, and he knows how to make things work when you go underhanded. So I thought about the possibilities, and I said, well, why would he do that? You know what I mean? My dentist had an interesting remark. He said it would be more likely that if Biden and his wife had been diagnosed positive, then Trump would have said, that's a hoax. They're just trying to the Democrats want to win the election, So I can't see why this would be a hoax. Explain to me if you think it could be a hoax.
Well, okay, let me just say this, Richard. I, having covered Chicago politics for all these years, I really struggle, almost like an addict. I struggle with skepticism. Okay, I've learned not to take at face value whatever a politician tells me. I know that's really cynical sounding, and I should probably seek psychological help for it. But I deal with this on a regular basis.
I agree. I agree.
I'm just being honest with you. So, my initial reaction, I got a text from my oldest daughter. And she says, do you believe it? I go, why would he be making it up? And she said to get people to feel sorry for him. And I go, no, that's not Trump. Yeah. He doesn't care about people like that.
No, I thought about that. Yeah, I thought about that. No, I just missed that.
Yeah, but then I had a conversation with Dennis, who is the producer of the show, and he is a wrestling aficionado. And he was telling me that a classic move in pro wrestling is for when one of the contestants looks like he's about to lose, all of a sudden he has a miraculous recovery and he wins. And Donald Trump, he learned a lot of his tricks from pro wrestling. He's very involved in pro wrestling, or about 10, 15 years ago. And I'm like, oh my God, could this be the oldest pro wrestling trick in the book?
Yeah. He is a big wrestling fan. Yeah. That's funny. Anything's possible. Look, I even took it to this extent. I said, well, maybe this is a thing where, because the election is so close, maybe he's thinking, if I lose, I'm going to go to jail. So if I fake this thing with the COVID and I'm incapacitated and Mike Pence has to take over and be president, then he can pardon me while I'm still in office. Because after Trump, if Trump loses, you might want to fit him for an orange jumpsuit. So, I mean, this is a big deal. I mean, he's got a lot at stake here. He really does. New Yorkers salivating, waiting for him to lose.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's kind of far fetched, but as you point out, with Trump, anything is possible, and he's going to go to every corner of the thought process that he can in order to win. So it's not below him to do that. There's no bottom. When most people reach a bottom and they say, well, how do I get out? This guy reaches the bottom and he keeps digging, so what can you say?
Yeah. I'm with you 100%. Everything you just said, and the reality of prison for Donald Trump is very real. If he doesn't win this election, you're absolutely correct. The revelation about his taxes that the New York Times just came out with, since the last time you were on the show, Richard, shows that he's about $400 million in debt. The feds are coming after for a $72 million refund that they now wish they hadn't given him. Who knows the conflicting reports he's made about how much money his income is and his expenses are. As if he's not the president of the United States, the Justice Department is free to go after him. And I believe there's a lot of lawyers in the Justice Department who would love nothing more than to see the orange man wearing orange. Do you agree with me on that?
Yeah, and I think it's totally different when he becomes not the president, because he won't have the Justice Department and Barr being his personal attorneys. I mean, he'll be on his own. Obviously, he can afford to hire a lot of attorneys, but I don't think that's going to help him. If you think about guys with a lot of money that don't get away. What's his name? Stein. He didn't get away, right? Killed himself before doing a long jail term. The one guy who did get away was a much lesser thing. The guy who owns the New England Patriots, they dropped that case. So he's got a lot of money. He got away clean, So, but Trump, there's so much involved with Trump and, the foreign interests in terms of that money. Deutsche Bank has said clearly that they will give up the records because they're shady, so they don't want to get into any more trouble. So he's in trouble. He's in trouble if he loses. The guy who paid, $750 2 years in a row in federal taxes. But here's what I don't get. Help me with this. If you're somebody who is an average, and they're saying now that, no offense, Ben, but they're saying that the Americans who the description of the Americans who are totally in Trump's corner are white American men, working class men. It's hard for me to believe that these guys, especially ones who've lost their jobs, and I've seen some of them interviewed on television, and they're saying they're still behind him. He's our guy. So I don't. If you were a almost billionaire and you paid $750 in taxes, and you're some guy working at at a plant somewhere, or you're a teacher or a nurse, any of the people that they described, and the taxes you pay were more than he paid, how can you accept that? I don't. He's really good at. He has psyched the public to the degree, and they were ready for it. You know what I mean? After Obama, they felt disenfranchised, and they were ready for. He came along at the right time. The timing was great. He didn't expect to be president. He thought he'd lose. You know, his thing was a setup for a television network. Because if he lost, he was going to, they cheated me, blah blah blah. But I've got this new network. That, as I read, that was in the plan. So I don't get it. I just really don't understand it. And even with the COVID-19 diagnosis for he and his wife, there are still going to be people who will say there's something is not right here, and I still don't believe it. I'm still not going to wear a mask. Did you see the guy? I can't remember. I think he's an elected official. Might have been a governor on television. He took up scissors and he cut the mask. He said, the government will not tell me what to do and can't make me wear a mask. And he took a pair of scissors, and he cut it in half. That's insanity.
Yeah.
So how much further can you go? I just don't really know.
Well, the level of insanity about masks, a lot of which Donald Trump promoted, has overtaken just. I don't even know if we'll be ever to contain it, if you get what I'm saying. It's just this knee-jerk attitude as though somehow they're infringing on your liberty. But I'll go back to what you started saying, Richard. Why would someone who is working class or even poor and pays more in taxes or as much in taxes as Donald Trump not be outraged? And I think that there's this anti-authoritarian air that Donald Trump emits, which is so bizarre, since he is really a part of the elite in this country and has benefited from his privilege from the moment he came out of his mother's womb. Okay, he's one of the most. His father was wealthy. He was sheltered. Went to the finest schools, but he has this air about he says what he wants to say, and it defies political correctness. I got that in quotes, Richard. And so it's all part of I mean, look, man.
Here's a guy who said about the NFL taking a knee. What you need to do is, I'd like to be able to say, the owners should say, get that son of a bitch out of here. And people cheered, and they thought that was great, and all of that. But your point is well taken. Here's a guy who was born with a silver spoon in his mouth and a foot up his ass, but he, but he, when you compare Biden as a true American working type. I mean, he came from Scranton, Pennsylvania. His dad was just an ordinary worker. Here's a guy, unlike the Hillary thing, and I think this makes a big difference. He's a guy that there are some of the people that we're talking about now, they can relate to. And if he continues to make that a point, and he does, I'm from a working class family. We didn't have a lot. My dad lost his job. We had to go through a lot of changes. And, and I didn't go to an Ivy League school. I'm just a regular guy. And when he says that, he doesn't come across as a fake. He comes across as a regular guy. So hopefully some of the people we're talking about now can relate to that, you know what I mean? And why they love Trump, and he's a billionaire with his golf courses and all of that, I don't get that, because it's certainly not them. They're not going to play on these wonderful golf courses. And I saw an interview, I don't know if you saw this interview the other day with Cohen, and what's the guy who was press secretary for 5 minutes? Was an associate of his. I'm blanking on his name, but he was a real character. The Mooch. Right.
The Mooch.
The Mooch.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Scaramucci, Cohen, and the guy who wrote Art of the Deal, all three of them were on at the same time. And the Mooch said, listen, I can't lie. He said, I'm sorry that I went that way. He said, but look, he said the guy was fun to be around and he had a lot of money. He said, so who gets, if you're on the front seat at the Yankees game, stuff like that we used to do it. Cohen said the same thing. He said, we do stuff that was just unthinkable for any normal human being to be able to, any average human being was able to do. So Cohen said that he bought into it. You know what I mean? And he did all the things you do to stay there. And Cohen said he had some money before Trump, but the whole idea of being around Trump and all the glitz and glamour that went with it, and the Mooch said the same thing. Now, the guy who wrote the book, The Art of the Deal, he said he never had any misgivings about who Trump was. When he wrote that book, he knew it then. He said, but he thought the book would sell, and he sold himself out and wrote the book talking about Trump. And, not necessarily in glowing terms, but enough so that it made, because Trump liked to read about himself, and people thought that was interesting. But all three of these guys, it was interesting to see all three of them on at one time talking about Trump. That was fascinating.
Yeah, no, there's a lot of people who have regrets for the role they play in the elevation of Donald Trump. I've heard Howard Stern and David Letterman talk about this. Howard Stern and David Letterman had featured Trump on their show throughout the 90s and in the O's. And Trump would come on and promote his brand and promote whatever he was selling, like beat a tie, steaks, who knows it. Trump's such a con artist. He was always selling something. And they would allow him access to large chunks of the population. And he used that, Richard, to promote himself. And then he got a TV show, The Apprentice. It's all history. The rest is history. And he used television and he used the media in a way to sell a notion of himself that was fake. And here we are now in 2020 dealing with the aftershock of his just racism and his bigotry and his hatred. And some people like Howard Stern and David Letterman have professed shame for this and the role that they played in Donald Trump's promotion.
Well, listen to this in terms of individuals and how they respond. There's a friend of mine who lives in L.A., and we communicate a lot. So we're talking about the whole Trump thing and the debates, which we'll talk about in a minute. But there's a guy, a handyman in his building, who is a Mexican guy. And so he didn't have this conversation with him, but another tenant who's a good friend of mine, of his, said to him, he's talking to this guy about the debates. And the guy said, "Oh, man, listen, that was great, man. Like Trump kicked his ass, like, hey, man, this is a tough guy, blah, blah, blah." So my guy said, wait till I see this guy, you know what I mean? But you can't convince, listen, I think I said this to you the last time. Life is too short to argue with a Trump supporter.
Yeah. I'm with you. I don't. All right, let's talk about that debate. You've been a moderator of debates. I have too, by the way, in my time. Aldermanic debates, nothing remotely like the high pressure of a presidential debate on national TV. What was your thoughts of Chris Wallace's performance?
Well, I've heard a lot of negative thoughts about that. Somebody online, as a matter of fact, I think on a Facebook page, something about, they said it should have been Mike Wallace. His dad would have done something different, blah, 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 and all of that. I don't really buy that. Look, Trump is out of control, and so I don't care who's sitting there. It wouldn't matter. I think Chris Wallace did the best he could do. I happen to like Chris Wallace. I think he's a fair guy for somebody who works on Fox. He's a real journalist, and so I respect that. But I don't think anybody else would have done anything different if they maintained any kind of decorum. You could have been a guy who jumps up and down and says, "Oh, both of y'all shut the hell up." Well, what is that? You can't do that and get any credibility. So I think he did the best he could do in that situation. And I think it showed what Trump is really about too, when he kept saying, "Mr. President, would you please give Biden a chance to answer the question?" And then when he said, I think Trump said, maybe I should be the moderator. He totally disrespected Chris Wallace. But Trump supporters, like this guy I told you about, they look at that as, he's a bad mofo. Check what he did. And he knows, Trump knows how to use television. And you pointed that out. He really does. He knows how to manipulate, how to, when he was debating Hillary Clinton, that whole thing about walking behind her while she was speaking, like he knows what works. And so I thought Chris Wallace did the best job he could do. I respect him as a journalist. And I don't know. What are your thoughts?
I agree. I agree wholeheartedly. From the get-go, I've said I don't know what in the world Chris Wallace could have done. And I like to point out that everybody who's criticized him, they've not said what they would have done. And you had the President of the United States breaking every rule that he'd agreed to while his supporters cheer him on. So just all pretense that we're going to have a civilized debate that follows the rules are out the window. And it's the President of the United States. I have a hard time imagining, Richard, that a majority of the people, forget the country. I never believed Trump was going to get a majority of the vote in this Trump. I believe Biden will beat him by even a greater margin than Hillary Clinton. I'm talking about the majority of people in swing states like Wisconsin and Michigan and Pennsylvania. I just cannot believe that America has descended to the level where a majority of the voters in Wisconsin or Michigan or Pennsylvania could look at Donald Trump's performance at that debate stage and say, I want this man to lead the country. I have a hard time believing that, Richard.
Okay, but what do you think about this? I mean, and we'll talk about this. You and I discussed this before we went on. A lot of the Republican Party, whether governors or the Republicans, they're trying their best to suppress the votes in states that have large urban areas, like in Detroit. In Michigan, it's like Detroit. They're trying to suppress the vote because the last time around, a lot of black Detroiters did not vote at all. Yeah, and that was a big margin question on that. The same thing with Pittsburgh and some other places where there's a large black population, a large minority population. The governors are trying their best to find a way to depress the vote. So I don't know what the end result of that is, but what do you think about that?
That scares me, and you're absolutely correct. Philadelphia, Donald Trump, he's being very strategic. He goes after Philadelphia. Why? Because Pennsylvania is an absolute crucial swing state. So he thinks he can win a majority of the white vote in Pennsylvania, but he knows, to your point, that if a large segment of black voters show up, he will lose. So what he does is he tries to undercut confidence in voting by mail in cities like cities like Philadelphia, maybe to deter people from voting. The only strategy that Donald Trump has for winning the black vote is to suppress the black vote. He doesn't want to win the black vote by that. It's, in other words, prevent enough black people from voting so that he can eke out a win. So yes, it's very disturbing. The story that came out of Michigan about those two Republican operatives, we talked about this briefly, who were doing the robocalls to black voters in the Detroit area, same principle. He's going to win Michigan. He's got to keep the black vote down in Detroit. So yeah, that's his Hail Mary. That's the only chance I think he has. Go ahead.
And by the way, since maybe some people don't know what that was about, but you might explain that robocall project that happened with these two guys, in terms of why they were calling people and what they were telling black voters.
Yeah, they were calling. Oh my God, it's so absurd. They were calling a robocall saying that if you vote by mail, you could possibly be committing fraud. You could be prosecuted, perhaps. The government get a fine at the least. It was an attempt to deter black voters from voting by putting the fear in their minds that there was something illegal about it. And it is so cynical, Richard, because at the same token, during the debate, he goes, I've done more for black people than any president.
You're right. You know what bothers me a lot, by the way, about those two guys, they were under or had been under investigation from the FBI because they had done some other things before. It seems like these guys didn't have any fear that they'd be caught. And, because if they're found guilty of this, they could do 20 years. And that probably won't happen, but they could do a lot of time. They tried to start a rumor about Pete Buttigieg and who he was dealing with at that point. I mean, everybody knows the man is gay. He said he was gay, so not a problem. But they were trying to come up with something on him. So according to the news reports, they had a guy who was willing to say something really bad about his relationship or a relationship with Buttigieg. And then at the last minute, the guy didn't even know Buttigieg, but at the last minute, the guy backed out. But that's how awful these guys are, and I hope to see them go to jail this time around. I really do.
Yeah, they can join Trump in the cell. All right, let's move on and close with a discussion of music. And you were the one who suggested this topic, and I love it. We probably could do a whole show about this. But Rolling Stone came out with a new #1 album, a new #1 ranked album of all time. And that album is "What's Going On" by Marvin Gaye. What's your general thoughts about What's Going On, the album?
Listen, the first time the radio station I was working for at that time, I think it was WGRT, way back in the day. And from the moment we played that, it was 1971, and the first time we put a track on, we said, "This is it. This is the bomb." You know what I mean? And that was the response across the board. And the interesting story about that is Berry Gordy did not want to put that out. He said, "Look, we're the music of young America. We don't want to get into social issues." And he thought Marvin Gaye was somebody who the women loved, and he was a love guy. And he said, I interviewed Berry Gordy, and he said to me, but he said it in his book and to other people, but I interviewed him about his book, and I asked him, I said, "Well, about your feelings about that?" And he said he just didn't buy into it, and he was not going to release it. And I think, as the story goes, it was a guy who worked for him in the upper echelons of the company, who I think Barry was out of the country or something. Anyway, he released the single "What's Going On," and the response was so incredible in 2 days that when Berry Gordy got hold, because he was really pissed, but when he saw the numbers, he said, "Oh, look, damn, this is, this is wow," because it's usually about the money, right? And so, this was incredible. The album itself is amazing. I mean, the issues that Marvin touched on, the ecology, the inner city, police brutality. It's just, and it was a concept album, which was brand new for R&B and pop, where the music was continuous. And when they cut singles, they had to find a place to, cut the track away from the next track. But it was a concept album that it was just too amazing. And the thing about it is, everybody bought into it. I mean, there wasn't a situation where some people said, yeah, it's okay. Other people said it was great. Everybody, and that includes black stations and pop stations. It was like immediate. So it's amazing that that particular recording of What's Going On replaced the Sgt. Pepper album by the Beatles as the #1. Rolling Stone lists their 500 best albums of all time, and at this point, Marvin Gaye is #1.
Well, this is obviously such a subjective thing anyway. Why Sgt. Pepper was ever ahead of What's Going On, I can't buy into that. We're talking about a certain kind of music, popular music, I guess. I called it pop, but it's not. I don't know if that's fair it's popular music as opposed to, like, let's say jazz. I would probably, personally, just speaking for me, would put Songs in the Key of Life ahead of What's Going On. And I love both albums. It's not diminishing one over the other, Richard. Songs in the Key of Life by Stevie Wonder, which came out a few years after What's Going On. He just blew me away with the diversity, the range that he showed on that album of different types of songs and different styles. But
let me tell you a story. Let me tell you a quick story about Songs in the Key of Life. I was a program director at that point, and Songs in the Key of Life came out, and so Stevie Wonder was here in Chicago making the rounds of radio stations. So somebody called me and said, Stevie is on over at WLS. WLS was a big rock station in town at that point. And I said, okay, that's cool. And then he made a stop at WVON, and we were not on the schedule. And because we had nobody called us, and I only knew that he was on these other stations because somebody called me. So I called LA, and I raised hell as a program director and reminded them that this station at that point, which it was WJPC, was owned by Johnson Publishing Company, Ebony Jet. Now, you don't want to mess around and piss us off, you know what I mean? So we got a call from the promotion guy who was on the road with Stevie, and he said, we'll be by in about an hour, So as a matter of fact, at WLS, the record was not even being played. They talked about it, and it was on, the radio stations back in those days, sometimes like WLS had two charts. WLS had a chart that they played from on the air, and then they had another chart or an additional chart that went into record stores. You were listed, but you weren't being played on the radio. But LS was so big that even that was a plus. So the Songs in the Key of Life was on their list, but it wasn't being played, and that really pissed me off because we were playing the hell out of it. You know what I mean? So anyway, that's kind of the story of that. I was I was totally pissed about that at the time.
Did you interview Stevie? Did you yourself interview him?
Yeah, I did. Yeah, I did, and he was. Stevie, to his credit, was very slick. He said, listen, he said, because I said to him, I said, I thought we were not going to be able to talk to you. He said, well, listen, you guys will always be on the list. He says, we like to save the best for last. I went, oh, shit. I'll never forget that. I will never forget that. So
he thought that in the drive over. What am I going to tell you? Yeah.
Unbelievable. So, yeah, that was my memory of that. And yes, it was an absolutely great, great album. No question.
Yeah, it's but there's one line going back to what's going on. So I liked it as when it came out. I liked the song, I liked the album a lot. But that was before I went through this. I know I've mentioned this before. I went through a very strong marijuana phase, Richard Steele, and so I remember I was really high one night. And it was the guy I was smoking with. This is about 1974. So he said, here's what you got to do. Listen to what's going on with the headphones on. And so I put the headphones on. And I don't want to imitate Marvin Gaye because I would destroy. But you know that little, like he does that little scat singing and what's going on?
Yeah.
Richard, someday... You don't have to even smoke reefer. Just put the headphones on.
Yeah, like it was ethereal, I think is the word I'm looking for. In terms of, with the headphones on and the great production. By the way, a lot of the guys he used were jazz guys. Motown did that. They called these guys the Funk Brothers. They never got, they at a later point they got recognized. But the good thing about using these guys is that they would add stuff, suggestions to the production suggestions that were very helpful because these were jazz guys, and so they knew music. They were actual musicians. But Marvin Gaye, you're right. It was kind of ethereal. If you just let the whole thing play all the way through and just kick back and take a puff and you were cool.
Yeah. No. Oh my God. That beep, 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 beep. Oh, God, I can hear it right now. Great Marvin Gaye, what's going on? I'm glad it's number one. Number two should be Songs in the Key of Life. Let's just call it for what it is, all right? And maybe every month they can rotate, and Songs in the Key of Life can go to number one.
Very good.
We'll work it that way. All right, we'll close with this. Speaking of jazz, Ella Fitzgerald. I'm a huge Ella. I know you are too. Everybody loves Ella Fitzgerald. And just saw in the New York Times that a recording has come out. They discovered a documentary, the concert, sort of the Lost Berlin tapes. Richard, talk about the significance of her Berlin concert from the early 60s.
Well, it was so incredible because she, obviously that's where Mac the Knife came out of her mouth because she couldn't remember the lyrics, and she says that in the song. Can't remember the lyrics, but she made it so. She was so artistic, and her knowledge of jazz and scat singing was so great that people loved it. I mean, I loved it. It was absolutely amazing because her voice was such that even when she was singing the words, I don't know the lyrics. It was like a song, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so it became a standard in jazz, but it also became a big pop hit too, which was something for its time, and especially with jazz, because jazz records did not become pop hits, but that was.
Try not to rock the boat. Don't wanna give you all false hope. That's the story from the editorial.
It's kind of a pop hit that got played across the board on lots of different stations, primarily easy listening stations, but it was just a fantastic. She was an incredible performer with an amazing voice. I have a very short story about Ella Fitzgerald. I never met her, but I did interview Tommy Flanagan. Tommy Flanagan was her pianist and musical director for about, he was with her 3 or 4 years, then he left, he came back, and he was with her for the next 10 years. So he was with her for a very long time. I did interview him, and he told me, he said she was so incredibly popular that wherever they played, overseas or here in the States, but especially overseas, when you think, well, maybe they don't know her as well. Well, they knew her better, overseas. So he said that wherever they played on the marquee, the only thing there was her first name, Ella. That was enough. And he said it was amazing. He said how she was treated. She was treated like a queen wherever they performed. Wherever, whatever hotel it was, she was given the best accommodations, top of the line. He said the only place that it was top of the line, and this place too, but the only place he really didn't like at all was when they were in Russia. He said it was bleak. He said there was no warmth at all. I don't mean just the temperature, but the people were incredibly enthusiastic when Ella was singing. But he just didn't like the whole thing about Russia. But he said every place they played, they just, up on the marquee, all it said was Ella. And he said that was always amazing to him. So he was a great guy, too, laid back, great piano player. And so that was my one experience close to Ella.
Close to, well, it's the closest I ever came to Ella Fitzgerald, which is not very close at all. I think it was mid-'80s. I can't remember the exact year. She did an outdoor performance across the street from where Millennium Park is, where you and Don Cornelius were at the band show. And I think it may have been during the Harold Washington years. Richard, everyone and their mother was at this concert. I mean, they filled up that field. It was free concert.
I went to that. Yeah, I went. I was there. Yeah,
84, 85 was it? I forget the exact thing. And that was, I don't even remember if it was just like, there's Ella. I was so far back sitting in a chair, you know what I mean? A lawn chair. But it's like, that's as close as I ever came to Ella Fitzgerald. But you remember that concert, huh? Yeah.
Yeah,
it was
absolutely. A great night. There's a documentary out that they interviewed some people. So this came out years ago, not the latest one, but they were talking about she was on the road so often and so long, and there's very few breaks in between. She had spent like almost 52 weeks on the road because she was in such great demand. So when she got sick, the people in the documentary were saying that, she really got sick and her eyesight was bad, and then she really got sick and couldn't really do any concert work. And somebody who was attending her said that she would wake up in the middle of the night, not quite fully all there, and say, well, what time was the next gig? What time do we leave? What are we going to get there? You know what I mean? At a point when she had stopped performing. But it was so ingrained in her whole persona that it was like performance, hit the stage, hit the road, get on a plane, and do your thing.
Yeah. Yeah, that was her life, the great Ella Fitzgerald. Richard, we're out of time. I want to thank you very much. We'll do it again next month, politics and music. And don't forget, next time you listen to that, What's Going On, put the headphones on and smoke whatever you want to smoke, all right?
What's going on? All right, dude. Have a great day, dude.
Take care. Stay safe and sound. That's Richard Steele. I'm Ben Joravsky. Take care, everyone.
And there he was, Richard Steele. Smoke pot, I guess, guys. All right. We're going to take a little break here. Once again, if you just tuned in, unfortunately, Ben's father passed away yesterday. Ben's taking the day off. I believe the funeral is today. He wanted me to tell everyone that we're going to have a new show tomorrow. He's doing well. So we're playing this instead on the live stream, playing one of over 1,500 episodes of the Ben Joravsky Show. You can find these, by the way, at both Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites and wherever else you download your favorite podcasts. Live stream chat, what's going on? Having a good time, I see. Frank weighed in asking about tonight's First Tuesday show. For those who didn't know, yes, Ben Joravsky does a show. Well, he did a show there until the pandemic, and then it kind of got shut down. But it's called First Tuesday. It's every first Tuesday of the month, live at the Hideout, 1354 West Wabansia. I believe it's still on. Maya's going to be holding the fort down, I believe. Yeah, go check it out on Facebook. Weigh in, ask them if it's on. Ben mentioned it and said it'll probably still be going on. He may not be there, but I think Maya may be holding the fort down. So the last time I heard, yes, First Tuesday is still happening. So go find that online to be sure, Frank and everybody else. All right, we're going to play one more Michael Girardi song. Then after that, it's going to be our interview from back in August with a guy named Jonathan Ballew, a street reporter who had a great interview with us. The Brown Line gets in there a few times, but nevertheless, a great interview. So don't go anywhere. It's the Ben Joravsky Show. By the way, if you want to send your condolences to Ben, you can at Benny J Show, BENNY, the letter J Show, on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. You can send us an email, BennyJShow@gmail.com, or you can leave a voicemail and we'll play it tomorrow for Ben. 708-658-4788, 708-658-4788. Yeah, all right. So here we go. More Michael Girardi, then our interview with Jonathan Ballew.
The candidate most likable is somehow not electable. That's the story from the editorial board. We'd like to save the world when it's under attack, but how you gonna pay for that? Ow!
our teachers! Yay for our teachers!
Hey everybody, how's it going? It's just me, Dennis. Ben's not here. He's taking the day off. Sadly, his father passed away. I mentioned that earlier. He'll be back tomorrow. All right, our best of interviews continues. In thinking of what to do here last minute, I decided, okay, what about our summer? How was your summer, everybody, on the live stream chat? What's that? A pandemic? Awful, probably? Yeah, I know. Mine too. But we did have some great interviews over the summer, particularly our one with Troy LaRaviere. I'm not playing that interview today, though. That's featured on both Chicago Sun-Times and Chicago Reader websites and wherever else you download your favorite podcast. The interview I'm talking about is when we talked with a fella named Jonathan Ballew. He's a street reporter. He was there in Chicago after the George Floyd protests. He was there during the Columbus statue removal. Very interesting insight here from this fella. So we're going to play our interview with Jonathan Ballew. This was back in August. And once again, we're going to be back tomorrow with a brand new live show. Monroe Anderson will be with us. We'll have the same roster. You know, we're going to be doing our thing, doing the local news and all that. We're just taking the day off here a bit. But I figured I'd let the live stream, live stream chat, because you guys love doing that. So live stream family, we think you're awesome. Thank you so much. Can't thank you enough. Brianna, Frank. We got someone named Beesky. I think that's Brent. What's up, dude? And everybody in the live stream chat, you guys are awesome. We thank you so much. All right, without further ado, let's play our interview with Jonathan Ballew. We will be back tomorrow with a brand new live show. If you got something you want to say if you want me to say it on the show, I'll do it after this interview here. Jonathan Ballew and Ben Joravsky. We will be back tomorrow.
Get outside and explore Chicago on a CAFC river cruise aboard Chicago's First Lady. Now open and adhering to public health safety standards. Called the #1 boat tour in Chicago by TripAdvisor, CAC docents share the fascinating secrets and stories behind more than 50 famous buildings facing the Chicago River. Delight in panoramic views and hear how our hometown became world-renowned for its architecture. Book your tickets today at architecture.org. Let me tell you about voting by mail. Voting by mail ensures equitable access for everyone. Normally, vote by mail applications are filled out online or in person. This creates a burden for people with limited access to transportation or internet services. Disproportionately, the elderly or people of color who are among those at greatest risk from COVID-19. Because of the pandemic, a law was passed in Illinois for November requiring vote by mail applications be sent to anyone who voted in 2018, 2019, or the 2020 primary. This falls short of what is needed, particularly since these elections saw low turnout. We need to expand access. Mail-in voting is the best way to ensure everyone's voice can be heard safely. We can help expand voting access in Chicagoland by asking officials to send every eligible voter a vote-by-mail application. So, visit votemailchicago.com. That's votemailchicago.com for call scripts and a petition. One more time. Vote. V-O-T-E. Mail. M-A-I-L. Chicago. CHICAGO.com to make sure that every voter in Cook County has safe and equitable polling.
That's correct.
How did you go from sharing stories over the years to deciding to write a book?
Good question, Mayor. Good question.
This Ben Joravsky Show, Benny J bonus interview is brought to you in part by the International Brotherhood of Electrical Workers, Local 9, the International Union of Operating Engineers, Local 150, and the Chicago Federation of Labor. Benny J, take it away.
Bonus time on the Ben Joravsky Show. As I speak, it's Friday, July 31st, 2020. But of course, it's a podcast. You could be listening anytime. Just give you a sense of what's in the headlines today. Speaker Madigan asks House Dems, are you with me or against me? Yeah, we've been talking about it all day. Madigan Gate. Wait. That was our joke for today. We're waiting for Madigan, waiting to see if any Dems will announce that they are not going to support Madigan anymore. House Speaker Michael Madigan up to his eyebrows in trouble. But we're not going to be talking about Michael Madigan today's show. We talked enough about him today. Instead, you know what? I'm not going to get ahead of myself. It's a bonus show. I'm going to allow my distinguished guest to introduce himself as we do, and then you'll learn what we're going to be talking about. So, distinguished guest, take this opportunity to introduce yourself.
I'm not sure about distinguished, but I'm Jonathan Ballew. I'm a freelance journalist in Chicago. I used to be a staff reporter at Block Club Chicago, graduated with a journalism degree at DePaul University, downtown the Loop, was a Marine Corps veteran, now was served active duty before that, and am currently just out in town doing some on-the-ground reporting.
That is putting it mildly. And Jonathan Ballew, I'm going to give him a shout out right now, is a badass with a capital B. He goes out pretty much, I don't know every night, but whenever there's a significant demonstration with his camera, just an old school type reporter on the scene, filming what's going on, taking notes on what's going on, filing stories that he sells as a freelancer to various outlets, and then dropping onto this Twitter feed. Good stuff. It's like really old school, Jonathan. And I'm looking at you. You're a young man. You know, why don't you just give a little background of like what led you from the Marines to doing this? It just does not seem to be the kind of career move that I would expect from the Marines. But, you know, I could be falsely stereotyping Marines. So talk about how you went from being a kid in high school to a Marine to a late night, midnight rambler reporter chronicling what's going down in the streets of Chicago.
You know, I don't think you're being unfair stereotyping. I don't really know many other Marine journalists. I ran into some, but and it definitely wasn't the financial move that was the most prudent. But, you know, I got on my deployment in 2016. I was on a boat, and I was realizing that, you know, I don't think I'm going to do, I had done just about 5 years active duty, and I was thinking, I'm not going to do this anymore. So what's next? And honestly, while I was on the ship, I started reading a lot. And I was a pretty avid reader as a kid and even through high school, but kind of got away from me in my like earlier 20s. And I just started devouring books, and then I started writing again. And I thought, you know, I kind of like doing this, and I wanted to do something that, you know, I felt like was helping people or was, you know, a public service. And so when I got out, I don't know how familiar you are with the GI Bill, but it's pretty much like a certificate to go to school for free while they pay for your housing. So I figured I'd come back to Chicago and I would try my hand at journalism, and I just kind of fell in love with it. And recently I've been honestly trying to get out of journalism, but it kind of just keeps pulling me back in. And back when I went out in May during those big protest weekend over Memorial Day weekend, and I went out without any plans of selling any stories or getting any coverage, but I just thought that it seemed like it was going to be something where, you know, we would want a trained documenter to be there on the front lines. And I felt like if things got hairy, which obviously they did, that I would be someone who was equipped to be there on the front lines covering it. And since then, I guess the freelance work has just kept coming, and I feel like the work's having impact. So I just keep on going for now.
All right, we're going to get in. Let's take a deep dive on both the events of Memorial Day weekend and also the events of the Columbus statue. That's where I really came face to face with your journalism. Love the stuff you were sending out about Statue Gate. And but just before we do, I started leading you through Memorial Day. You say you love journalism. What is it about journalism that you love?
You know, I think when it comes down to it, I think there's something important about documenting what's going on around us, but doing it in a way that tries to get to the truth of the matter. And I think there's a lot of power in that. And I think it provides a service that it's hard to even discern some quality journalism from non-quality journalism these days with, all the social media out there and all of we're constantly bombarded with different media. But I think good journalism still shines through. And I think that's why publications are still willing to pay for it, because, someone who's trained to document something in the correct way can really have an impact at it's showing what happened. Because, for instance, take the protests. I mean, if you get somebody who's very one way or very the other way, you're going to get different narratives that are very much one direction. But if you get a truly trained documenter who's just out there trying to observe what's going on, I think you can get a picture of what's happening for some of these events, and it helps balance out the narratives, I feel.
All right, and we'll get into that issue of a point of view of the journalist, because your Columbus statue coverage, particularly the essay you wrote in Esquire, you're very upfront about your point of view when the statue came down.
Yeah, I think that's something too. I would say there's a bit of an old guard versus new guard journalists community even now, where, when I first got into journalism, I was kind of buying into the pure objectivity myth, or at least how I considered a myth, where, a journalist has to be 100% unbiased all the time and can never show any opinions ever, and it's kind of that old adage. Whereas I've kind of come to believe, and I think a lot of journalists do as well, that we're human beings, Ben. We have opinions, we have bias, and there's no way to avoid that. So for me personally, I seek to be fair and I seek to be accurate, and I think I think the two can work together. And I've covered a lot of tough stories where obviously I feel one way or the other, but I do my very due diligence to talk to both people on both sides, or if there's multiple sides or perspectives. And when somebody comes at me about some of my reporting, I often say, well, can you point to somewhere in the story where you think I was being unfair or inaccurate? And most of the time the answer is no. And I think that that's what journalists should be striving for, is fairness and accuracy.
Even though that sounds like something that Fox stole, I agree with everything you said 100%. What was the Fox line? They had their fairness or whatever.
Yeah. I didn't mean to be a Fox News player.
Yeah, but it was they did the exact opposite. They projected good vibrations and then put out bad vibrations. But I'm with you 100%. The notion of 100% activity is a myth. I can't believe they even teach. Well, I've never been to journalism school, Jonathan, so I don't know what they teach in journalism school. But I if they're still putting that in the youngsters' heads, it's such a myth.
Well, if you even look at some of the journalists, people are so revering Ida B. Wells these days. Ida B. Wells was pretty anti-lynching. Anti-lynching as they come, and it doesn't mean her journalism didn't have massive impact. Or, I think even if you look at the study of media, this fairness doctrine and how that plays into a lot of things. This whole perfectly balanced, purely unobjective is kind of a more recent phenomenon in media within the last 100 years.
Could you imagine if Ida B. Wells had gone for the other side? Well, we've now seen the horrible sides of lynching. Let's go talk to the lynchers and see the good points of lynching. What a joke. You're absolutely correct. And I agree with you 100% on that. All right, let's give people a sense of what Jonathan's life is like. Let's go back in time to we'll get to the Columbus statue one. I love that, folks. Don't worry, I'm going to get to Columbus statue. I've been promising our listeners that we would talk about Columbus Statue Gate. But let's talk about the Memorial Day unrest and the role that you played in chronicling it. Why don't we start? I don't know what day is best for you to start, Saturday or Sunday, but whatever it is, talk about how you went about your business that day.
I'd actually say Friday would be the better day. And quite honestly, I would think I was one of the few journalists out there that day. I know I ran into a Tribune photographer, I think John Kim, if I remember correctly, who's fantastic, by the way. I ran into him there Friday. But there was kind of a smaller action that started to develop into something bigger that day. And I kind of raced down there. I actually ended up getting in a car accident that day. So I was kind of flustered and I was just a bit late to it. So then I don't know if anyone who covers protests knows that this is the worst place to be in. But if you start chasing the protests once they've already started moving, it can be a nightmare. So I'm down there in the loop and I'm trying to find this protest. And luckily for me, I did. And it just felt different. I covered many protests in the past, at least ones at Federal Plaza, which I'm sure you've seen many of. And they usually follow that, the same kind of pattern where it's, meet at Federal Plaza, march in the approved route, and then you finish up. And it really doesn't cause much of an issue for anybody, minus like a few traffic issues. But this protest was immediately seeking to disrupt. You know, they were trying to shut down Michigan Avenue. They were trying to shut down State Street. They weren't working together with the police or the local city government. You know, they were trying to cause chaos, and that, as protests have often done for decades. And I could feel a different kind of tension in the air, and I kind of felt like this was going to be something that was going to materialize. And I remember the big moment of the evening was they got to the prison downtown, the Metropolitan Correctional Center, I believe it's called. You know what I'm talking about? Yep. And as they got down there, this had been after we had some bike blockades from police, and we'd had protesters racing to beat the bike blockades. And, you know, I'd seen a guy burning an American flag in front of the police officer. So like things were escalating. And as we got down to the prison, there was, you know, prisoners. We couldn't see inside, but the people who were incarcerated, you know, the lights were flickering on and off, and you could hear tapping on the glass. And it was just kind of this like watershed moment, or at least for the protesters and for me, that, you know, they're at this symbol of like mass incarceration in a way. And there's these protesters chanting, you know, we love you, up to these, you know, people who are incarcerated. And you've got this wall of cops that's stopping them, because at one point they are banging on the glass of the detention center. And it felt like, I was like, they didn't quite have the numbers to really overwhelm any of the police officers that day, but you could feel the energy was there. And I was thinking to myself, like, Saturday, like this is going to be big, because just my tweets alone started blowing up, and they started like going viral. And, you know, I don't usually go viral, so I don't have the largest following. And so I was seeing hundreds of thousands of people like liking or retweeting some of these images that I was putting out there. And lots of people were even commenting like, oh, I'm going to be there Saturday, or we'll be there Saturday. And then I started getting tips from, you know, people who worked within different aldermen's offices and all sorts of different, you know, off the record kind of tipsters, telling me they had heard of all sorts of caravans that were planning to come down to come down to the Loop on Saturday. And before you know it, I was thinking, you know, this is going to be a protest in the hundreds. So I guess we'll move forward to Saturday. And I got down there, I don't remember the time, but I was there about 15 minutes, 30 minutes before the actionable protest was supposed to start. And there were already like 1,000 people there. And I was like, holy crap, this is going to be large. And then within an hour, there was cars just lining every street from, I think, Dearborn all the way down and all the way around the block, cars just dropping off dozens of people at a time, people honking like crazy. I mean, just so many people, you couldn't even contain them all within the area. And when the march started that Saturday, I was like, this doesn't make sense, because they were marching out, but there was no, you couldn't even tell the front from the back of the line, because there was just such a mass amount of people. And all of a sudden, you know, then the police started trying to control the routes of where everyone was going. And some people went one way, another went another. And there was some pretty, you know, actionable things between cops and protesters. And that's when it kind of just dissolved, you know, and there was just pockets of resistance and protest throughout the Loop for the rest of the day. And it was something to see, you know.
Now, when you talk about police trying to control the march route, what exactly are they doing to try to control that?
Well, so they had someone who was like, I believe they called them a police liaison, and they were in like they weren't in like a police gear, or like they weren't in like riot gear or anything like that. They had like a neon vest. I can't remember what it said on the back of it, but they had been coordinated with some of the organizers of the march. And so they marched straight. Instead of going north on Dearborn, they had them to the left, and they were like going around the plaza in like a circle. But by the time it's like a head of a snake almost, by the time the head of the snake got around the bend and made a full circle around Federal Plaza, they had already met up with like a giant mass of protesters. So now you don't even know where the front of the line is versus the back of the line. And that's when it kind of dissolved into just kind of chaos, honestly.
And when you see something like somebody burning an American flag in front of a police officer, what's your reaction? You're a Marine vet. Mm-hmm. What are you thinking when you see that?
You know, I don't think that I would think the same as many Marines, and I have a lot of veteran friends who I know vehemently disagree with me on this. But I mean, to me, freedom is freedom, and part of being free is the freedom to burn our most quote unquote sacred emblem. You know, and so when we tell people they can't burn our flag anymore, like, are we really the country of freedom? So I guess to me, I think I wrote about this in my Chicago Mag piece too. I had never seen a flag burning in person. So it was jarring for me. I was like, holy crap, the American flag is on fire. And it's literally an arm's reach away from this line of CPD officers. But I kind of thought, like, damn, that's pretty cool. Like, that's pretty awesome that we live in this country where a black man can burn a flag in front of a police officer, presumably without consequence. Maybe not today with all of the overreach we're seeing throughout the country with federal troops. Maybe that wouldn't be the case. But presumably, I mean, what's the law? Is Texas versus Johnson? Is that the Supreme Court case? I can't remember. But there's the Supreme Court case that says you can burn the flag because it's your right as an American to express your displeasure with your government.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, although Donald Trump, for the record, has said that he favors a law that would ban burning the flag and make it punishable offense. I just wanted to point this out. This is an example of, we talked about, no one's completely objective. Now I'm going to display my lack of objectivity by pointing out there's a great inconsistency here. Donald John Trump says that people should have the constitutional right of free expression to wave the Confederate flag, but at the same time, he wants a ban on burning the American flag. Interesting where free expression begins and free expression ends.
I mean, there's a difference between, patriotism and blind nationalism. And I think the line has gotten skewed for a lot of Americans where they just don't seem to understand that, blindly following laws or law and order of, like, you're required to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance or you're required to say the Pledge of Allegiance. That's not freedom, in my opinion. That's a totalitarian dictatorship that tells you you're required to stand for the pledge or you're required to not take a knee for an anthem. Like, you cannot put limits on people's free expression.
So I'm presuming from what you said that you were supporting Colin Kaepernick when he took the knee.
Actually, when was that back? When we didn't officially first take the knee? That was probably 2017, but that sound right?
2016, I want to say, but I could be off. But I think 2016.
I think I had some evolution of my own. At first, I think I was kind of like against it, and then I think I talked to some of my Black Marines and friends who said, it kind of explained to me like what he was doing and why he was doing it, and I said, it's his damn right to do whatever he wants during the anthem. And I mean, if you ask me today, if I'm at a sporting event and then the anthem comes on, I'll happily take a knee because I understand now, like, what is being protested and how Colin Kaepernick went about it. And so for me, I don't have any problem with it. In fact, it's an act of patriotism.
And I just want to take this moment to tell our listeners, if you haven't already, check out the interview I did with Tony O, a Marine veteran who passionately, Jonathan, I know we're on a tangent, we're going to get back to the...
No, I like the tangent.
Passionately advocate. He won't stand. He's a dear friend of mine. We go to games. He won't stand for the national anthem. He's the other, and he has a whole worldview about it. And I think he's 8 years in the Marines. He's older than you. He's a generation above you. He's a 90s guy. But he has a whole thing about it. So I urge everybody, want to check. This guy takes a deep dive. Tony O, I believe it was around the 4th of July. We did a 4th of July interview on it. Kate gets in this a little more. All right. Back to the situation. So you're chronicling. And get a sense of what are you looking like? Do you have like a ID around your neck or wearing a helmet? We'll talk about that.
So when I go out to protests now, I try to be as nondescript as possible. I usually wear a gray T-shirt, maybe some gray or off green pants. I have my boots on. I usually have my backpack, but then I just wear a bright yellow press, like it says press, and it has my CPD press pass in it as well. And I just wear that, and I want to be identified as press as easily as possible. So when I walk up and down police lines, because let's say you've got a line of protesters and a line of officers, and they're having a standoff, I'll walk in between those two, and I'll walk up and down that line with my phone camera, and I feel that holds everyone accountable. There's no one side narrative of what actually happened at that front line. Like, I'm the one who's covering it, and so my camera is going to cover what's going on. So I'll hold my press pass up as high as next to my face almost, with my phone in the other hand. So I mean, it's pretty damn clear to anybody who's looking at me that I'm pressed,
And have you ever gotten grief from one side or the other, like police giving you a hard time or protesters giving you a hard time?
I mean, quite frankly, I have almost never gotten any issue from the protesters and during my coverage. And I expected to be honest, with the, some of the feelings that people have about the media today. And I'm sure, many of the protesters don't like the mainstream media, but I don't really think maybe it's because I don't come off like that. And maybe I'm not sure. But if anything, I was getting protesters like ushering me to the front. They were getting out of my way and like offering me spots to get up there quicker so they want things documented, Ben. I think like, at least from my experience personally, the protesters over these last few months, they want, especially independent media, they want press up at the front, like documenting what's going on, because a lot of them don't have time to be filming things. They're in the middle of protesting. In terms of police, I would love to say that all the police officers that I've dealt with have been completely respectful of me as press, and many, many, many of them have. But also there was plenty who were not, and plenty of. I mean, I pepper sprayed on Saturday, by an officer while I was holding up my press pass, clear as day, and he sprayed me right in the face. So I mean, I can't say that I was constantly respected as press by law enforcement.
Did you make it on Saturday from the downtown? Were you in the downtown when they called when they raised the bridges and said that everybody had to be off the streets? Were you downtown when that went down?
Oh yeah, man. I was downtown up until I think around midnight, if I remember off the top of my head. I was there on Lake Street, especially if you remember like where the Lake L stop is down there. And I was walking up and down there as things were being, looted and as things were burning, and, people had dragged, newspaper boxes and dumpsters into the street, and M80s were going off inside the dumpsters, and things were on fire, and a 7-Eleven was bashed out, and all the sprinklers were going out. And I remember someone had taken scratch offs, and they were just flying in the air because they had thrown like hundreds of them in the air. As you walked up and down the block there, it's almost all corporate places, and nearly every single place was just completely just ransacked. Even the banks, they have double glass security stuff, so they couldn't get into the banks, but they had smashed out the front windows at least.
And were the police trying to arrest looters and people smashing windows, or had they just backed off and were allowing it to go on?
I would say closer to the second thing you said, they're backing off, but like obviously the police were still making arrests, and hundreds of arrests were made. But at least that time that I was walking on Lake Street, it was mostly like, I think I wrote about it, it felt like a scene out of The Purge, like, I don't know if you know that movie, but yeah, for those who don't know that movie, it's, the premise is that, for one night, there are no laws in the country, and it allows the citizens to purge, but that's what it felt like, to be honest. It felt like there was almost anything goes. But yeah, at that point, the bridges had been raised, and I think they were almost had lost control at that point, and we've talked about people, or at least we've reported on people it wasn't necessarily just protesters at that point. There was even reports of people coming from nearby cities or out of state even to take advantage of that opportunity to loot.
And were you personally afraid?
I think this probably comes down to the Marine Corps training, and I wasn't afraid at all, honestly, but that's just because I was more thinking about doing my job, and more focusing on what's going on around you. And even in the Marine Corps, they teach you about when things get very hectic or stressful, there's like a whole color code system called Cooper's Colors Code. And it like tells you not to get into the black, which is when you like shut down and, you're so afraid that like you almost are in shock and you can't function. They teach you how to operate within like a certain level of where stress is a good thing. It heightens your senses, it heightens your ability to react and to think. But like too much, if you let that get to you too much, then I think you can dissolve. But I did feel like I was equipped to handle what was going on. But when I look back on it, I think about some of the things that I saw on that Saturday, especially near the Walgreens, right on Michigan by Old Trick Tower. We were in danger a lot of times. There were bricks being thrown, and I didn't have a helmet on. I could have taken a brick to the head pretty easily. At one point, I had a rubber bullet gun aimed right at me from maybe 15 meters away, and I was like, that's the one time of the day I remember being actually pretty scared, because I was like, if this thing gets shot and I take this to the face, like I could die, or at the very least like lose an eye, or because I know for a fact those are called non-lethal, but they should be called less lethal, because they can kill somebody.
And so how did you get out without being arrested? It was a curfew. You're there until, what'd you say, midnight, did you say? Around midnight on Saturday? So
I give credit to the police officers. Like a lot of times throughout Friday, Saturday, Sunday, when it was like dispersing the crowds and telling people to go home, because I forgot there was the curfew going on, of course. So after the curfew was going, I think for the most part, my press pass was respected. So like I'd be walking around and be like, you got to get out of here. And I'd be holding up my press pass and be like, hey, I'm press. And for the most part, I was able to kind of wander wherever I wanted to.
All right, so let's get to Sunday. Talk about what you did on Sunday. Did you go back downtown again, or did you go to some neighborhoods?
I started to go downtown. I wanted to see if I could get through, because you remember they blocked it off basically, and you couldn't get down there unless you were like an essential worker or you had an address there, or you could, whatever. So I kind of wanted to test that out, and so I brought my press pass and I drove my car, and I think I entered through LaSalle, if I remember correctly, from Old Town area. And so they had city like garbage trucks or dump trucks, I can't remember which they were, blocking off the places, but I was able to show my press pass and they let me through. But I got downtown and obviously it was kind of dead, and it was incredible how fast they'd cleaned it up. Like it almost looked like it looked like it almost never happened down there. I mean, everything was boarded at that point, and most of the streets were swept. At that point, there was some state police that had been deployed to different corners. I went down to where the Picasso sculpture is, and there was like one action going on, but nothing crazy. And I started getting tons of reports of like the same kind of looting and rioting happening on the South Side. So I decided to check that out, and I talked with my editors at Block Club Chicago, and I talked to some of my editors at the Daily Beast, and they were interested in the coverage, and it seemed like a place to go. So I basically took Halstead, and I got on Halstead and just took it all the way, like from, you can get on Halstead from, I think if you get on Roosevelt, I think it can connect you to Halstead.
Yep.
I took that south, and I drove up and down, basically all the way to the Hundreds and back up, and I did that throughout the day. And I mean, it was just, the South Side was just a different world at that point. I mean, you could feel like a palpable fear, even of the people who were just driving their cars that day. People weren't respecting stop signs or stoplights as much. They were just trying to get the hell home, because like there was every time you'd come to one block, you'd see a liquor store being completely looted, or you'd see a grocery store being looted. I remember at one point I was stuck. I can't remember which street I was on, but I was stuck at a light, and there was total gridlock in this intersection because all these cars had tried to go when there wasn't their turn at the light. And right next to me, the store is being completely looted, and people are getting out of their cars to come and like join in the looting. Some are doing that. An ambulance comes flying through. I'm not kidding you, being chased by a pickup truck. Like, I don't know why. I mean, I obviously was not able to report it. And so I'm sitting there and I start hearing, people screaming 12, 12, or 5-0 police. And I'm like looking around for the police. I'm trying to figure out where the hell they are. And I'm videoing this. And then it hits me, like, they think I'm the police officer because I'm like the dude with a camera filming stuff, and I'm, they thought I was the police officer. So then I start holding out my press pass and I'm like, no, press. And everyone was like, oh, okay. And went back to what they were doing. But like the tension that was in the air was freaking palpable.
So wait, you had gotten out of your car and you were walking at this stage? Would people were yelling?
My car. And so then I was kind of a sitting duck, to be honest with you. And before I knew it, like I don't know. I want to say I was probably just past, probably between 35th and 53rd. I'm not exactly sure which area, but there was a grocery store being looted, and I'm stuck at that light, and I was filming everything. And so I think people were getting really suspicious about why I was filming, and I think I have a military bearing anyways. I probably came off like an undercover detective or something.
Well, you should know that we've had a lot of discussion about what went down on those over that weekend. And as you know, Alderman Raymond Lopez has been on the show several times. He's very critical.
I listened to him come on last week talking about it with you.
Yeah, and right, last Friday. And he's been very critical of, the mayor. He blames the mayor. He does not blame the police. He blames the mayor. So your assessment, not only as a journalist, but as a veteran of the Marines, how do you think the city handled what went down over the Memorial Day weekend?
I don't want to speak to Sunday as much because I'm not a part of those internal meetings like Alderman Lopez was, and so I don't want to spitball there. But in terms of Saturday, I mean, I've read, and I don't have them on me, I wish I would have brought them for the show, but I've read some studies too and they kind of align with my personal feelings on this, that you show up to a protest as a law enforcement agency with riot gear and you're going to incite a riot, and I feel like I covered the big protest on Monday in Uptown, and there wasn't the same level of policing there. There wasn't the same riot gear police. There wasn't the same state police showing up, and the whole action went off without a hitch. And I feel when I showed up on Saturday, it felt like a militarized police force had descended upon Chicago already. Like they were ready for whatever happened to happen. And I guess I personally feel that our country's over-policed anyways. So I feel it's a kind of a byproduct of the symptom of over-policing.
Wow, that's a whole other concept. We talk a lot about this show. Are we over police? Are there too many police in the country? And it's interesting you should say that. When I'm not gonna, I'm just gonna raise this. The votes for the local school councils on whether they should keep the police in the school, pretty much most of the schools are voting to keep their police in the school. So it's an interesting dynamic that's going on in this country right now, Jonathan, where our country is finally coming face to face with the notion of what role should police play and how should they play it and what is an appropriate use of force and where should the police be involved and where shouldn't they be involved. And every time it seems like the defund the police movement is getting strong, I get this notion that people, speaking to Chicago now, push back. No, don't go too far. So it's like a balancing act. I don't know if the city has figured it out yet.
Well, it's interesting. They talk about, does police make us safer? What makes a safe community? I mean, if you go out and look at like Naperville, for instance, right? I did some rough math on it the other day, and Naperville's got about 250 sworn officers, right? So, and their population is about 150,000. And Chicago has about 2.5 million people, give or take, right? So if you take those numbers and you multiply it, Chicago should have about 4,000 sworn officers. But Chicago has 12,000 police officers. So by that notion, Chicago is about 3 times as policed as Naperville. And when you look at the spending rates, I mean, I think if I did the math too, Naperville spends per capita about half or even less than what Chicago spends on their police. And so is that because Chicagoans are more dangerous people than Napervillians? I mean, I don't buy that, And so I think there's been a lot of essays written about what would it look like with less police. I think it would look like a lot like some of these communities that have a smaller police force.
Valid point. All right, let's move on to. I'll avoid a discussion. Were you, by the way, anywhere near Bobby Rush's office? I never asked you this for Popcorn Gate.
No, but I did watch the Popcorn Gate with great interest the next day.
Okay. Do you have any thoughts you want to go on that, or before I move on to Columbus?
No, nothing that hasn't been said by everybody. I don't think I have anything super relevant to add to the discussion.
All right. Well, I'll before we move on, I'll keep saying what I say. And this is a journalist in me. I've been a journalist for 5,000 years. I'm waiting for the city to finally release whatever documents it's going to release on what went down at Bobby Rush's office. The chain of command, were the police ordered there? Did Bobby Rush's office ask them to go there? These are just all basic questions as a journalist. If you want to put the story together,
they need to be answered. You're not wrong.
Yeah, and I got a feeling, Jonathan, that somehow or other these questions will never be answered. It'll just be one of these myths about what the police showing up at Bobby Rush's office. All right, let's move on to the Columbus statue situation. In some ways, not nearly as dangerous, I guess, as what you experienced on that Sunday and even on Saturday during Memorial Day, but it was really it was very symbolic, I guess, of larger struggles in the city. Talk about it.
So that had been my 3rd or 4th time camping out that statue with tips that it was going to come down. And I was starting to get kind of cynical about it because I'd seen the damn statue so many times. And I'm like, this thing is freaking huge. And the week before that, I'd seen them throw the ropes on it and I didn't see that personally, but I'd seen the video of them trying to throw the ropes on it and pull it down. And I'm like, it just doesn't seem like, the protesters are ever going to be able to isolate that statue enough from police to be able to take the time to throw full-size chains around it or, mount it to some kind of vehicle and pull it down. It just seemed like it wasn't going to happen. But then that night I was out in near Mayor Lightfoot's house where protesters were protesting by there. And all of the reporters, at least the freelancers I was out there with, started getting texts or tips that like, hey, the city is, I believe Greg Pratt broke the story originally that Mayor Lightfoot, from the Tribune, Greg Pratt broke the story that Mayor Lightfoot was considering taking the statue down. And then we got the tip later that it was coming down that night. So I got back into my car right away and just drove straight over there. And we were playing the waiting game and a lot of the broadcast media was there. And it was getting closer and closer to 11 when it was supposed to come down. And we hadn't seen a single city vehicle. And I was like, it's another goose chase, this thing's not coming down. Like I'm sitting here doing nothing. And then before you know it, we started seeing, some city trucks pull up, and then we knew the statue was coming down. But those 3 hours or 4 hours before that, it was just a really weird night then. Really weird night. And it felt like almost like appropriate that it was a weird night. I don't know if I mentioned this in the story. I think I did. Just hundreds and hundreds of motorcycles coming by every so often that were just doing stunts and wheelies. And at one point we're doing burnouts just feet from us, like I have no idea who they were represented by. I had gotten a tip earlier in the week actually from a friend out in Texas who was just a Marine Corps buddy who was saying, hey, I'm hearing about, hundreds of motorcycle stunt riders that are heading to Chicago. And I never followed it up, but I had to shoot him a text and say, hey, I think you might have been right about that.
Yeah, no, there was a surreal aspect. And by this is where I was following you in real time. There was a surreal aspect, almost like it was like a drug-infused scene. And not even reefer, but like acid drugs, you know what I mean? Just like really trippy stuff. The motorcycles, like where are they coming from and who are they? And
the person in the vagina costume.
Let's discuss the person in the vagina costume. Go ahead, explain the person in the vagina costume.
Well, honestly, Ben, I was so locked in that I had talked to this person and like seen him talking to, the FOP president, John, how do you say it, Catanzara? Is that?
Yeah.
Yeah. He's speaking with him and they were going back and forth. And I didn't even realize what he was wearing, to be honest with you, or what they were wearing. I believe they are non-binary, so the pronouns will be they. But I didn't even know what they were wearing until somebody said, have you seen the person in the vagina costume? And I was like, what? What are you talking about? And they're like, right there. And I look, I'm like, oh my God, they're wearing a costume of a vagina. And it was like so clear once I had seen it. And then it made it feel like an acid trip. You're totally right that like I'm watching the FOP president argue with a man or a person in a vagina, and the person in the vagina costume is bringing up very good, valid points. And I've dug into a little bit more of their work, and they do a lot of work surrounding the homeless and a lot of documenting of stuff. And I know that they are a lot of different protests, and they're I would say they're like very much an activist first, but documenting and even a journalist second. And I've seen them at a couple of events even since then.
So were you listening in on the great debate between, I would give the person's name instead of just saying the person in the vagina suit, but the person in the vagina suit and John Catanzara, did you get to listen into much of their debate?
I did, and I think the big thing was I kept hearing John Catanzara say, what did Columbus? I think he was comparing Hitler to Columbus, and John Catanzara was saying, how is Columbus anywhere near what Hitler had done? And as someone who's an indigenous Native American, like I was thinking to myself, the person genocided an entire group of people. So I mean, the comparisons to Hitler aren't that far fetched, in my personal opinion.
And did you get involved, or were you really keeping the journalistic distance?
No, I did not get involved. I think I did tweet something about how I was really wishing I could get involved, because I had some personal thoughts about Columbus that I wanted to share, but I did not, and I kind of just filmed. And there was a large group of off-duty cops. I can't say for sure that all of them were, but unequivocally some of them were off-duty cops. They were all chatting with Catanzara, and a lot of them were wearing back to blue, thin blue lines, and some of them had said they were off-duty cops, but when we asked like where they were with, they would kind of shut up at that point. And they were having a kind of a get together. They had, cigars, they had, Budweisers, they were having drinks, and some of the, I know 5th Ward Alderman candidate of last election cycle, Will Calloway, was down there, and he was pretty irate about the fact that they were drinking on, public sidewalk right in front of all these police officers with no consequences. And so then they started going back and forth, and, Will Calloway's a passionate guy, and he was yelling at them and they were yelling at him. And then at some points there was, they were screaming about fighting each other and like, let's step aside from the cameras and go, down the block and figure this out. But the problem was every time they would walk away, 10 reporters would follow them,
I'm sorry, I don't mean to laugh, but I'm just flashing back to the scene because it was so classic. Calloway is in their face, and this one beefy dude, I have no idea who he was. He may have been off duty.
Was he in the wife beater?
I can't recall if he's wearing. He was like, "Come on, let's step out. Let's step out." There's like a police rope around, and I'm like, "Oh my God, this is so Chicago. This is everything wrong with the city of Chicago." Hey, come on, let's go step out. You want? We'll just take it out here. You know what I mean? That's so Chicago. Oh, that's how we settle things in our town. We're all tough. We're gonna go fight. You know what I mean? There's nobody can reason. Nobody's going to have a debate. You know what I'm saying, Jonathan? No one's going to say, well, that's an interesting point. Like momentarily reflect on what let's go take it outside, huh? So Chicago, Jonathan. Anyway, I really enjoy. I think that was you. I was watching your Twitter feed. You captured that moment. And were there a lot of protesters at that scene who wanted the statue to come down at that moment, or was it were they outnumbered by the police who wanted it to stay?
No, I'd say at first it was more pro statue, pro Columbus, and then it started to gather. And I'm sure some of them came from the other action, but I'm sure some people just showed up as they saw it covered on social media or whatnot. But by the end of the night, I'd say it was more pull the statue down, folks, get it down. And they actually stayed more. I think once a lot of the pro Columbus folks, once they saw the statue was coming down, like a lot of them left for the evening.
And so talk about that when the city crews, the work crews finally came and took the statue down. Just give us people a sense of what was that like? What was that like?
Chicago, especially because I saw a Park District truck pull up, and so I'm like, I gotta go check that out. And then I see like a hard hat crew of maybe 10 people standing around behind it, having like a what I would call from like the Marine Corps, like a safety brief, where like the guy goes over everything and they plan it out. So I start walking up there slowly, and they're talking and talking. Then they all start seeing me at the same time, and I'll just kind of stop talking, right? And they like look at me, and they're like, "What do you want?" I'm like,
"So Chicago."
I'm like, "Oh, hey, I'm press. I'm just wondering, like, are you guys here to take the statue down?" And they go, "I don't know." So I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? He's like, probably not. No, get out of here. And I'm like,
Chicago, man.
Very, very much. And I was like, okay, so this thing's probably coming down at this point. Because then I saw a cherry picker come in, and then we saw, what's his name? I can't remember. He's like the big police liaison guy. He's always in a suit. His name is, but he's always kind of like a bridge between the community and the police and, protesters, etc. I want to say his last, Glenn Brooks, maybe. I'm trying to remember his name. It's escaping me. But he was kind of telling us like, hey, media, like this is happening. Here's where you can stage. And so we were all like right there with a clear shot. And then the city crews come over and the police, and they're like telling us now, sorry, you guys can't be there anymore. It's a safety issue. Granted, we're like 200 meters away from the statue at this point, but I after seeing it come down, I do kind of understand how they didn't want us in the way. So they backed us in, so they all just went to the middle of the street right there on Columbus, and we're all just standing there, and the photographers are pissed, because they can't get their shot right now, especially the broadcast guys with their sticks.
Yeah.
And they can't get the good shot, so they're all bless the producers who were all like, or those cameramen who were all bitching at the, at the police officers, and they're like, we need a better shot. And so eventually, just to shut us up, they moved us, and they were accommodating. I want to be fully upfront with that. They were very accommodating to us, and the police officers and the liaison moved us over to Roosevelt and gave us a special spot where if you showed us your press credentials, you could be there. So we all had the shot for the thing to come down. But that's another thing. When it actually did come down, and I don't know how much I captured this in the story I wrote, it was pretty funny because we've been waiting, of course. And when we're at that spot, we're waiting. And like, of course, when everyone's not paying attention for once, and there's a lull, we hear this crack, and it's just like everyone looks up, and I hear all the photographers go, damn it, and like just like so upset because like a lot of them missed the shot. And the ones who did have the shot are rolling, and they're like, I got it, I got the shot. And I'm like, this is exactly what happened. But like, I don't think the city crews are ready for it to crack from the base because it was like still wrapped in like whatever wrapping they had around it.
Yeah.
It was like, I think the wrapping was almost keeping it from like fully detaching because it was still on chains at that point. And then slowly, once they like got it, they cut the wrapping off or whatever, then it started suspending from midair and like taking apart. And everyone was getting their, their shots in. But it's just a weird night overall.
That is weird. I can just imagine some producer going, excuse me, I missed my shot. Can we do that again? Just one more time. Anyway, man, I got to tell everybody out there, go check out the article that Jonathan wrote in Esquire about it. It's really good. Yes, you do have that. You do have that bit in there about the cameraman missing their shot and it happening so quickly. And you also talk quite openly, and I give you credit for this. This is new school, new age journalism, which I applaud because I've only been doing it since the 80s. But hey, maybe I'm finally coming into time. But you're out there. You say, hey, man. I was happy to see the statue come down. You didn't beat around the bush and duck and dodge. You said it. I was happy to see the statue come down. And I'll be honest with you, too. I was happy to see the damn statue come down. But talk about that from your perspective, why you were happy to see the statue come down.
It's I've heard the argument of like it's going to erase history or whatever, but like Columbus is not in any danger of coming out of the history books. I mean, like we all know who Columbus is. No one's forgetting who he is. But I think when you look at the history that's finally come out about this person, reading his own diary, you can see he was a freaking monster. And so like, do we have to celebrate him with a 40-foot statue like in the park of native land, like where native people walk by all the time? I mean, I think I wrote about it too. I mean, the Potawatomi massacre was right up the road from there, and to me, there's far too few statues of people of color, Native people, Black Americans, and there's far too many of fascists, raping, genocidal maniacs.
Wow, I couldn't have said it better myself. And Jonathan Ballew, you're the man. You did outstanding journalism, in my humble opinion. I'm going to give a shout out to Colin Boyle. He's been on the show before. Not like I favor one young journalist over the other. Colin Boyle has done a hell of a job as well. He gets out there, and he's a Block Club guy as well. So I got to shout out some love for Colin Boyle. He does good stuff too. Jonathan, why don't you tell folks how they can follow you? Because you're still going out and covering street scenes like this. So give all the information you need so people can follow you.
I'd say the easiest way is just my Twitter, which is at JCB_Journo. That's JOURNO. So it's just at JCB_Journo. And I pretty much post all my work there. And it's got links to my bio or email and LinkedIn and all that good stuff.
All right, and his last name is spelled Ballew. Jonathan, Ballew. Jonathan, thank you so much for taking the time coming on the show. It was a blast talking to you, and best of luck to you, all right?
Yeah, anytime, Ben. I'll come on anytime you want to chat.
All right, man. That's Jonathan Ballew. I'm Ben Joravsky. Take care, everybody.
And there he was, Jonathan Ballew. One of my favorite interviews from over the summer. Very interesting insight there from Mr. Ballew. We do have to get him back on the program. For those who just joined us, once again, Ben's father passed yesterday, and so he's taking the day off, taking care of the funeral and all things like that. We will have a brand new live Ben Joravsky show tomorrow with the legendary Chicago journalist himself, Mr. Monroe Anderson. Yes, he's going to be joining us, and we'll be doing the show like we usually do, local news, National news, Ben will riff. He'll probably flip-flop on Madigan Gate. Who knows? He may flip-flop on Biden, Trump. I'm just kidding. He's not flip-flopping on that one. But no, thanks once again to the live stream chat. All of you guys are awesome. I believe there is First Tuesday. I think that's still going on, a virtual First Tuesday. So go check that out. Find it on Facebook, First Tuesday. Reach out to Maya. Bug Maya. Hey, Maya, you guys doing that show? Hit her up, and hopefully she'll let you know what's going on. I talked to Ben last night about it. He said that there should be First Tuesday still happening today. So if you got your tickets, go find out, all right? We're going to be back tomorrow. By the way, that interview you just heard with Jonathan Ballew, a lot more where that came from. Turns out there's over like 1,000 interviews. In fact, I'm going to go and look here. Over 1,400 Ben Joravsky Show episodes, all right? So there's a good chance you may have missed some shows or bonus interviews. Go check them out. Chicago Sun-Times, Chicago Reader websites, wherever else you download your favorite podcast. We can't thank the people who download. You guys are awesome. Thank you so much. We love you. If there's anything we can do for the downloaders, let us know. Send us an email. And if you want to send your condolences to Ben as well, please send us an email. BennyJShow@gmail.com. BENNY, the letter J show, @gmail.com. Follow us on social media. Send us a message there as well. BENNY, the letter J show. And you can send us a voicemail. You can always send us a voicemail. 708-658-4788. That number again, 708-658-4788. I believe. Oh, no, I thought we had a new voicemail, but it turns out we don't. Boy. And we will be reading your emails and things like that as well. So please send your condolences to Ben if you would like to do that. My name's Dennis, and we're out of here. Well, I say we're, but just me. I'm out of here. All right. So a brand new show tomorrow. Don't worry. Same time, 1 p.m. right here, live stream chat room. Go download those interviews. We'll see you tomorrow.
That's correct. That's correct.